question is, if you're talking about, say, for example, a commercial to residential conversion versus a cosmetic improvements. So earlier, what we said was that when you get a mortgage afterwards, they're going to go according to the sale value. So you have to show that you have increased the value by X thousand, right? But with the cosmetic refurb, it's a bit difficult to show how much value you've added if it's just all cosmetic. Really, there needs to be some type of development that's gone on, whether it's an extension or whatever. So how do we balance between development finance versus bridging finance when you need to show significant value on the refinance stage?
Okay, so the less you do to a property, okay, so the question there was, if we do a small amount of work, how do we justify the increase in value? Whereas the more work we do, the easier it is to justify an increase in value. That's perfectly true. And the reality is, the less you do to a property, the less likely it's going to be. So I had someone, they can buy a property, now what was it? It was something like they can buy it at 80, but it should be worth 120, but they just had to put paint and carpets in. It's going to spend about 2,000 on it. So I said, okay, so here's your challenge. He said, can I get it refinanced at 120? Because that's what my sole comparables are. I said, okay, here's the challenge. So you're going to say, I bought it at 80. They're going to know you bought it at 80. And you say, but it's worth 120. So the valuer, the lender, mortgage lender's valuer, say, okay, show me what you've done to the property that's added £40,000 worth of value. And if you said, well, I painted it nicely, and it's got new carpets, I think you've got a very little chance of getting that valued up and recycling your cash. And if you've gone as far as a new kitchen, new bathroom, maybe a new boiler, you're starting to get into the realms where you can actually justify the value you've added. So it's still a cosmetic refurb because it's not, excuse me, by definition, it's not structural. So it's a light refurb, not a heavy refurb. There's an element of risk and doubt on any of those sort of things. If you're doing a multi-unit conversion, so if you're converting a commercial building to a series of flats, okay, there'll be plenty of evidence on what those flats have sold for. And what you bought it for is not so important because they're lending on the value you've created. So it's easier to get the uplift in value when you're doing substantial work, yeah. So I don't know if that was your question.
Yeah, no, but my question is, if you're going to make substantial work, then does that mean you have to get a development as opposed to?
Okay, so where does bridging stop and where does development start? Okay, another bit of fast funding formula. Okay, let's do this.
There has to be the pursuit of the sweet spot in between the two.
Yeah, okay. So it's also fair to say that most bridging lenders don't do development. Most development lenders don't do bridging. You've got a few in between that have a foot in both camps, but usually it's one or the other. Okay, so if it's bridging, I'll write it first, then explain it. It's normally less than 50%. I'll explain what that is in a minute. So, if you're doing a cosmetic refurb on a property, you're almost certainly going to spend less than 50% of the purchase price on the refurb, correct? Is that right, yes or no? Okay. So you wouldn't buy a property for 100 and spend another 100 refurbing it, because you'd never get your money back. Okay? So that's always bridging. So bridging is where the spend to improve it is significantly less than the purchase price you paid. Now, you could buy an office block for 200,000. You could quite easily spend another 200,000 converting it into flats. So development finance is where you spend typically more than 50% of what you paid for the site or for the property on what you're doing to it. And also, as I said, development will only really lend if it's a new build or a significant conversion. They won't lend on refurbs.